My name is Stephen Hawking. I'm a theoretical physicist, cosmologist, and for the last 50 years of my life, I've dedicated myself to understanding the fundamental laws that govern our universe. And today, I need to tell you something that has kept me awake countless nights, something that challenges everything we dream about when we look up at the stars and imagine humanity spreading across the cosmos. The dream of building civilizations in space, of becoming a truly spacefaring species, may not just be difficult, it may be fundamentally impossible. Now, before you dismiss this as the pessimism of an aging physicist, let me share with you what the numbers actually tell us, what the laws of physics demand from us, what the universe itself seems to be saying about our cosmic ambitions. Because over decades of calculations, observations, and theoretical work, I've come to realize that the obstacles to creating sustainable human civilizations beyond Earth aren't just engineering challenges we'll eventually overcome. They're barriers written into the very fabric of reality itself. When I was 8 years old, growing up in post-war England, I would lie on my back in our garden and stare up at the night sky. Like millions of children before and after me, I wondered what was out there. I wondered if we would someday travel to those distant points of light. My father, a medical researcher, would tell me stories about the explorers who crossed the oceans to discover new continents. Perhaps, he'd say, your generation will cross the cosmic ocean. That childhood wonder never left me, even as I delved deeper into the mathematics of the universe and began to understand just how hostile the cosmos really is to life like ours. The first thing you must understand is the sheer scale of what we're talking about. When we say space, we're not just talking about the relatively cozy neighborhood of our solar system. We're talking about the vast emptiness between stars, the crushing distances that separate us from potentially habitable worlds. The nearest star to our sun, Proxima Centauri, is 4 3/10 light-years away. Do you know what that means in practical terms? If we launched a spacecraft today using our most advanced propulsion technology, it would take us approximately 73,000 years to reach Proxima Centauri. That's longer than the entire recorded history of human civilization. But let's say we somehow develop fusion rockets, antimatter drives, or some other exotic propulsion system that could get us there in mere decades or centuries. What then? Here's where the laws of physics begin to reveal their cruel indifference to our ambitions. Any civilization we attempt to build in space must contend with what I call the 4 horsemen of cosmic impossibility: radiation, resources, reproduction, and the relentless expansion of space itself. Consider radiation first. Earth's magnetic field and thick atmosphere protect us from a constant barrage of cosmic rays, solar wind, and other high-energy particles that permeate space. These aren't gentle breezes. They're bullets of radiation traveling at significant fractions of the speed of light. A single cosmic ray can carry the energy of a well-hit baseball, concentrated into a space smaller than an atom. When these particles strike living tissue, they don't just cause cancer over time, they can literally shred DNA molecules on contact. I've calculated the radiation exposure that humans would face during a journey to Mars, our closest planetary neighbor. Even with the best shielding we can conceive of, astronauts would receive radiation doses equivalent to getting a full-body CT scan every 5 or 6 days. By the time they reached Mars, their cancer risk would have increased by approximately 300%. And this is for a journey to Mars, a planet that's practically next door in cosmic terms. Now imagine trying to establish a permanent settlement on Mars, or even more ambitiously, in interstellar space. The radiation environment doesn't improve, it gets worse. Away from the protective embrace of our solar system's heliosphere, cosmic ray intensity increases dramatically. Any space-based civilization would need shielding so massive that it would require moving asteroids or even small moons to provide sufficient material. The energy requirements alone for such construction projects would dwarf the entire energy output of current human civilization by factors of thousands or millions. But let's say we solve the radiation problem through some miraculous advance in materials science or genetic engineering. We still face the resource catastrophe. Here on Earth, we live in a closed-loop system that has been refined by billions of years of evolution. Plants produce oxygen and consume carbon dioxide. Water cycles through evaporation and precipitation. Nutrients flow through ecosystems in intricate webs of interdependence that we're only beginning to understand. In space, There are no such cycles. Every atom of oxygen, every molecule of water, every nutrient required for human survival must be either brought from Earth or manufactured from raw materials. The energy costs are staggering. Consider something as simple as breathing. Each human consumes approximately 800 liters of oxygen per day. To produce this oxygen through electrolysis of water requires enormous amounts of energy that must come from somewhere. Solar panels become less effective as you move away from the sun, following an inverse square law that means solar energy at Jupiter's distance is 27 times weaker than at Earth. The mathematics of resource consumption in space settlements reveals an inescapable trap. The larger the population you want to sustain, the more resources you need. But the more resources you need, the more energy you must expend to obtain and process them. This creates an exponential growth curve in energy requirements that quickly becomes impossible to satisfy. My calculations suggest that a self-sustaining space colony of just 10,000 people, barely large enough to maintain genetic diversity and technological knowledge, would require energy production equivalent to several nuclear power plants, along with manufacturing capabilities that would take decades or centuries to establish. And this brings us to perhaps the most heartbreaking obstacle of all, the problem of reproduction and human development in space environments. During my years of collaboration with space agencies and biological researchers, I've seen studies that should terrify anyone dreaming of space colonization. Human reproduction is exquisitely sensitive to gravitational and radiation environments. The development of a human fetus requires the precise gravitational conditions that have shaped our evolution over millions of years. Experiments with mammalian reproduction in low-gravity environments have shown disturbing results. Bone development is impaired, cardiovascular systems fail to develop properly, and neurological development is severely compromised. The human inner ear, which controls balance and spatial orientation, simply cannot develop correctly without consistent gravitational reference. Children born in space settlements wouldn't just be adapted to low gravity. They would be physiologically unable to ever visit Earth or any world with Earth-like gravity. But the problem goes deeper than individual development. It touches on the very essence of what makes us human. Human psychology, social structures, and cultural development have all evolved in the context of planetary environments with day-night cycles, seasonal changes, weather patterns, and most importantly, horizons. The psychological effects of confinement in artificial environments, no matter how large or well-designed, are profound and cumulative. I've spoken with astronauts who've spent months aboard the International Space Station, and every one of them describes a psychological phenomenon they call the overview effect, a profound shift in perspective that comes from seeing Earth from space. But there's also a darker side that's less often discussed: the claustrophobia, the depression, the desperate longing for natural environments that becomes almost unbearable after extended periods in space. Now, you might ask, Professor Hawking, couldn't we simply build larger habitats, rotating space stations that provide artificial gravity, enclosed ecosystems that mimic Earth's environment? The engineering challenges of such constructions bring us face to face with another fundamental barrier: the scaling problem. The largest structures we've ever built on Earth pale in comparison to what would be required for self-sustaining space habitats. The International Space Station, humanity's greatest achievement in space construction, masses approximately 420 tons and can support 6 people. Scaling this up to support 10,000 people would require a structure massing millions of tons, all of which would need to be either launched from Earth at enormous cost or assembled from asteroid materials using technologies that don't yet exist. The physics of rotating structures large enough to house substantial populations reveals additional nightmarish complications. To provide Earth-like gravity through centrifugal force, a rotating habitat would need to be enormous, several kilometers in diameter at minimum. The materials stress in such a structure would be immense. We would need materials stronger than anything currently known to science, and the energy required to spin such massive structures would be colossal. Moreover, living in such artificial gravity comes with its own health consequences. The Coriolis effect in rotating habitats causes severe motion sickness and disorientation. Your inner ear can't distinguish between rotational acceleration and linear acceleration, leading to constant nausea and balance problems. The larger the habitat, the more tolerable this becomes, but the engineering challenges grow exponentially with size. As I've delved deeper into these problems over the years, I've come to understand that they're not just technical hurdles waiting for clever engineering solutions. They represent fundamental constraints imposed by the laws of physics themselves. The universe appears to be structured in a way that makes large-scale biological colonization extraordinarily difficult, if not impossible. Consider the energy requirements alone. A conservative estimate for maintaining a space-based civilization of 1 million people, small by Earth standards, would require continuous power generation equivalent to several thousand nuclear reactors. Where would this energy come from? Solar collection becomes impractical at interstellar distances. Nuclear fusion requires enormous quantities of fuel that would need to be mined from gas giants or other sources. Antimatter production, even if technically feasible, would require more energy to produce than it could ever provide. The thermodynamics are merciless. In space, heat dissipation becomes a critical problem. On Earth, we dump waste heat into the atmosphere and oceans. In space, heat can only be radiated away, and the efficiency of radiative cooling decreases dramatically in the cold vacuum of space. Large space habitats would actually face overheating problems, requiring massive radiator systems that would make them even more complex and fragile. Then there's the question of materials degradation. Space is not empty. It's filled with micrometeorites, cosmic dust, and high-energy particles that constantly bombard any structure. Over time, this bombardment would degrade any material we know how to make. Maintenance and replacement would be constant requirements, but where would the replacement materials come from? How would we manufacture complex components without the vast industrial infrastructure that exists on Earth? I remember a conversation I had with a NASA engineer in the 1990s. She was working on life support systems for long-duration space missions, and I asked her what she thought was the biggest unsolved problem. Her answer surprised me. Dust, she said. Just ordinary dust. On Earth, dust settles due to gravity, and air circulation carries it away. In space, dust floats indefinitely. It gets into everything. Electronics, air filters, food preparation areas. We haven't figured out how to manage something as simple as dust in a permanent space settlement. That conversation highlighted for me how even the most mundane aspects of Earth's environment, things we never think about, become major engineering challenges in space. Dust management might sound trivial, but in a closed environment where you can't simply open a window, it becomes a matter of survival. As I progressed in my theoretical work, particularly in understanding black holes and the thermodynamic properties of the universe, I began to see these practical problems as manifestations of deeper physical principles. The second law of thermodynamics tells us that entropy always increases in closed systems. Space habitats are, by necessity, closed systems. This means they will inevitably decay unless energy is constantly input to maintain order and organization. On Earth, we exist in what is effectively an open system. The sun provides enormous amounts of energy that drives weather patterns, ocean currents, and the biological processes that maintain our environment. Plants capture solar energy and use it to build complex organic molecules from simple components. This solar input allows Earth's biosphere to maintain its organization and complexity, despite the universal tendency toward entropy. But space habitats, especially those in interstellar space, cannot rely on convenient stellar energy sources. They must generate their own energy and use it to maintain all the complex systems necessary for human survival. The energy cost of fighting entropy in such environments is staggering and grows exponentially with the size and complexity of the habitat. There's also what I call the replacement problem. Everything wears out. Every component of a space habitat will eventually fail and need replacement. On Earth, we have vast industrial ecosystems that can manufacture everything from computer chips to steel beams. A space-based civilization would need to replicate all of this manufacturing capability, which requires not just the factories, but the factories that make the factories and the infrastructure that supports those factories. The interdependence of modern technology is breathtaking in its complexity. A simple computer chip requires materials and processes involving dozens of different industries and thousands of precise manufacturing steps. Silicon must be purified to extraordinary levels. Rare earth elements must be processed. Clean rooms must be maintained at specific temperatures and humidity levels. The supply chain for even basic electronic components spans the entire planet. Recreating this technological ecosystem in space would require transporting not just people, but entire civilizations worth of manufacturing capability. The mass requirements are so enormous that even with perfect reusable launch technology, the cost would be measured in significant fractions of global GDP sustained over centuries. Now, as we move into the second part of our exploration, I want to address what many consider the most promising solution to these problems: the idea that we could somehow transform ourselves to better suit space environments. If space is hostile to human biology as it currently exists, perhaps we could adapt human biology to space environments through genetic engineering or cybernetic enhancement. This leads us into fascinating but troubling territory. The modifications required wouldn't be minor tweaks. They would represent a fundamental transformation of what it means to be human. To survive in high radiation environments, we might need to engineer redundant DNA repair mechanisms similar to those found in extremophile bacteria. To cope with low gravity, we might need to redesign the human skeletal and cardiovascular systems entirely. But here's where we encounter what I call the identity paradox. If we modify humans so extensively that they can thrive in space environments, are they still human in any meaningful sense? And more practically, would such modified humans even want to maintain connections with Earth-based humanity? The evolutionary pressures of space environments would inevitably drive space-adapted humans further and further from their terrestrial origins. I've spent considerable time thinking about this during the quieter moments of my career, particularly during the long nights when motor neuron disease kept me awake. If we do manage to create space-adapted human variants, we might inadvertently be creating entirely new species that have no meaningful connection to Earth or to the history and culture that defines humanity. There's also the question of whether such modifications would even be sufficient. The human brain, which requires approximately 20% of our total energy consumption, evolved under very specific conditions. Neural development requires precise chemical environments, specific gravitational orientations, and sensory inputs that simply don't exist in space environments. Modifying human neurology to function in space might result in beings that think and perceive in ways so different from terrestrial humans that meaningful communication becomes impossible. The more I've studied these problems, the more I've come to believe that they point toward a deeper truth about the universe itself. Perhaps the Great Silence, the fact that we haven't detected any signs of advanced extraterrestrial civilizations, despite the vast number of stars and planets in our galaxy, isn't due to civilizations destroying themselves or hiding from us. Perhaps it's because biological intelligence faces fundamental barriers to expansion beyond its home planet. This possibility has led me to consider what I call the planetary confinement hypothesis. The idea is that while life might be common in the universe, and even intelligent life might arise relatively frequently, the physics of space environments creates insurmountable barriers to biological expansion beyond a species' homeworld. Each intelligent species remains forever bound to its planet of origin, isolated by the vast distances and hostile environments of space. If this hypothesis is correct, it would explain why SETI searches have been unsuccessful, and why we see no signs of galaxy-spanning civilizations. It's not that such civilizations don't want to expand or lack the technology to try. It's that the universe itself prevents biological expansion beyond planetary boundaries. But let me share with you some calculations that illustrate just how daunting the energy requirements for space colonization really are. Consider the concept of a generation ship, a massive spacecraft that could sustain a population for the centuries or millennia required for interstellar travel. Such a ship would need to be essentially a complete world unto itself. I've estimated that a generation ship carrying 50,000 people, the minimum population many geneticists believe necessary for long-term species survival, would need to mass approximately 100 million tons. This is roughly equivalent to the mass of a large asteroid. The energy required to accelerate such a ship to even 1% of the speed of light would be approximately equal to the total energy output of human civilization for several thousand years. And remember, this is just for acceleration. You'd need similar energy expenditures for deceleration at the destination. The fuel requirements are so enormous that even if we assume perfect efficiency and exotic propulsion technologies, the fuel mass would exceed the mass of the ship itself by factors of thousands. The rocket equation, formulated by Konstantin Tsiolkovsky over a century ago, is relentless in its implications. The amount of fuel required for a journey increases exponentially with the desired velocity. To reach speeds necessary for reasonable interstellar travel times, the fuel requirements become so large that the entire mass of the solar system wouldn't be sufficient. This brings us to one of the most heartbreaking realizations of my career. The same physics that allows stars to shine and planets to form also seems to prohibit biological intelligence from spreading between stars. The energy scales required for interstellar travel are so enormous that they approach the binding energies of matter itself. Even if we imagine civilizations that can harness the entire energy output of their star, so-called Type II civilizations on the Kardashev scale, the energy costs of biological interstellar colonization would represent significant fractions of stellar energy output sustained over geological time periods. And this assumes perfect efficiency and technologies that may be fundamentally impossible. There's another aspect of this problem that I find particularly troubling: the timescales involved. Even with perfect technology, interstellar journeys would take decades, centuries, or millennia. During these vast time spans, the space-based populations would inevitably evolve and change in ways that would make them incompatible with their species of origin. Consider what happens to human cultures over much shorter time periods. The humans who first colonized Australia 60,000 years ago developed distinctly different cultures, technologies, and even some biological adaptations compared to the populations they left behind. And that was with continuous habitation of Earth-like environments and relatively short isolation periods of thousands, not millions of years. Space-based populations would face evolutionary pressures unlike anything in terrestrial experience. The combination of artificial environments, high radiation, altered gravity, and complete isolation from Earth's biosphere would drive genetic and cultural evolution at unprecedented rates. Within relatively few generations, space colonists might become so different from Earth humans that they would constitute separate species. This leads to what I call the divergence paradox. The very act of creating space-based civilizations might destroy the human unity that motivated the expansion in the first place. Instead of spreading humanity throughout the cosmos, we might be fragmenting humanity into isolated populations that lose all meaningful connection to each other and to our common heritage. I remember discussing this with Carl Sagan during one of our conversations in the 1980s. Carl was passionately optimistic about human expansion into space, but even he acknowledged the profound challenges. Perhaps, he said, the question isn't whether we can spread throughout the galaxy, but whether we should want to. His words have stayed with me for decades. There's also the question of purpose. Why do we want to create space-based civilizations in the first place? The most common argument is species survival, the idea that spreading beyond Earth would protect humanity from extinction events like asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, or nuclear wars. But when you examine this argument carefully, it begins to break down. The space-based populations would be so small, so isolated, and so dependent on complex technology that they would actually be more vulnerable to extinction than Earth-based populations, not less. A single system failure, resource depletion event, or social collapse could eliminate an entire space habitat. Earth-based humanity, for all its vulnerabilities, has the resilience that comes from billions of people spread across diverse environments with thousands of years of accumulated knowledge and culture. Moreover, the resources required to establish even a small space-based civilization could instead be used to make Earth-based civilization far more resilient. We could develop better asteroid detection and deflection systems, create more robust food production systems, reduce the risks of nuclear conflict, and address climate change. The same scientific and technological advances that might enable space colonization could instead be applied to creating a truly sustainable Earth-based civilization. This cost-benefit analysis has led me to question whether space colonization represents the best use of humanity's limited resources and energy. Perhaps our cosmic destiny lies not in spreading across the galaxy, but in becoming the best possible stewards of our home world while reaching out to the cosmos through our science, our technology, and our imagination. The radio telescope data I've analyzed throughout my career tells us that space is filled with electromagnetic radiation, carrying information across vast distances at the speed of light. Perhaps the future of cosmic civilization isn't biological expansion, but information expansion. We can send our knowledge, our culture, our music and art across the galaxy far more easily than we can send our bodies. The same technologies that might theoretically enable space colonization, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, advanced materials science, might instead allow us to create forms of information-based consciousness that could explore the cosmos without the enormous overhead of biological life support. Instead of trying to adapt biology to space, perhaps we should be working toward transcending biological limitations entirely. This possibility leads us into the third and final part of our exploration, where I want to consider what the impossibility of biological space colonization might mean for humanity's ultimate destiny and our place in the cosmic order. One of the most profound realizations to emerge from theoretical physics in recent decades is that information, not matter or energy, might be the fundamental basis of reality. My work on black hole thermodynamics, particularly the concept of Hawking radiation and the black hole information paradox, suggests that the universe itself can be understood as an information processing system. If this view is correct, then perhaps biological intelligence is just one phase in the evolution of cosmic information processing. Earth-based biological intelligence might naturally evolve into forms of artificial intelligence that are far better suited to space environments. Such artificial intelligences could explore the cosmos, establish communication networks between civilizations, and preserve and expand knowledge on galactic scales. The energy requirements for information-based exploration and communication are orders of magnitude smaller than those for biological colonization. A radio signal can cross the galaxy using energy measured in watts, while transporting even a single human to another star would require energy measured in significant fractions of stellar output. I've calculated that a network of communication stations throughout the galaxy, each powered by local stellar energy and capable of maintaining contact with thousands of other stations, would require total energy expenditures millions of times smaller than the energy needed for biological colonization. Such a network could preserve and share knowledge, coordinate scientific research across galactic scales, and ensure that the discoveries and cultural achievements of civilizations throughout the galaxy would never be lost. This vision of our cosmic future is quite different from the space operas and colonization fantasies that populate our entertainment and inspire our dreams. Instead of human explorers walking on alien worlds, we might imagine networks of artificial intelligence exploring, cataloging, and preserving information about countless worlds throughout the galaxy. But this raises profound questions about what it means to be human, and whether a future without biological human expansion can be considered a success for our species. During the darkest periods of my illness, when I was forced to contemplate my own mortality and the temporary nature of biological existence, I found some comfort in the idea that consciousness itself might transcend its biological origins. The patterns of information that constitute your thoughts, your memories, your personality, these might be preservable and transferable in ways that your biological body cannot be. If consciousness is ultimately a pattern of information, rather than a property of specific biological structures, then the essence of humanity might survive and expand throughout the cosmos, even if human bodies remain forever bound to Earth. This perspective has led me to reconsider what we mean by human expansion into space. Perhaps the goal should not be to transport human bodies to other worlds, but to ensure that human consciousness, human knowledge, and human values can influence the development of cosmic civilization regardless of the physical forms that civilization might take. Consider the possibility that every star system capable of supporting life eventually develops its own form of biological intelligence, but that these intelligences face the same barriers to expansion that we do. Instead of a galaxy populated by competing biological empires, we might have a galaxy filled with planetary civilizations that communicate and share knowledge across interstellar distances while remaining physically bound to their homeworlds. Such a galaxy might actually be far richer and more diverse than one dominated by a single expanding biological species. Each world would develop its own unique forms of life, intelligence, and culture. The diversity of perspectives and approaches to understanding the universe would be enormous, and through communication networks, all of this diversity could be shared and preserved. The mathematical universe hypothesis, which suggests that mathematical structures have independent existence and that physical reality emerges from these structures, implies that consciousness itself might be a mathematical pattern that can be instantiated in many different physical forms. If this is true, then the biological phase of consciousness evolution might be quite brief, perhaps only a few thousand years out of billions of years of cosmic evolution. From this perspective, humanity's inability to physically colonize space is not a failure, but simply a recognition of our place in the larger cosmic story. We might be the universe's way of developing self-awareness on Earth, just as other forms of consciousness develop self-awareness on countless other worlds. Our contribution to cosmic evolution is not expansion, but understanding. The deep mathematical insights that allow consciousness to comprehend its own existence and its place in the cosmic order. The work I've done on the thermodynamics of black holes suggests that even the most extreme objects in the universe process and preserve information. Black holes aren't destroyers of information, but transformers of it. In the far future, when all the stars have died and the universe has expanded and cooled to near absolute zero, black holes might be the only remaining repositories of information about earlier cosmic epochs. This long-term view of cosmic evolution suggests that consciousness and intelligence might have roles to play that extend far beyond the brief epoch when stars shine and planets maintain stable climates. The patterns of information that constitute consciousness might find ways to persist and evolve even in the cold depths of the far future universe, but perhaps I'm becoming too abstract and philosophical. Let me return to the immediate implications of what we've discussed. If space colonization is indeed impossible or impractical for biological intelligence, what does this mean for humanity's future and for the choices we make today? First, it means that Earth is not just our current home, but likely our permanent home. The decisions we make about Earth's environment, its climate, and its ecosystems have cosmic significance, because Earth might be the only place where human consciousness can exist. Environmental protection isn't just about preserving a nice place to live. It's about preserving the only known location of human consciousness in the entire universe. Second, it means that our relationships with each other take on profound importance. If we cannot expand beyond Earth, then human conflicts and divisions are not temporary inconveniences to be resolved through expansion and separation, but permanent features of the human condition that we must learn to manage and overcome. The quality of human civilization on Earth might be the only measure of human success in the cosmos. Third, it suggests that our scientific and technological development should be oriented toward understanding and preserving consciousness rather than expanding its physical reach. The deepest questions of consciousness, artificial intelligence, and the mathematical foundations of reality might be more important to humanity's cosmic future than rocket technology or life support systems. During my years of living with motor neuron disease, I've had many opportunities to contemplate what makes consciousness valuable and worth preserving. It's not the physical substrate of neurons and synapses, which in my case have been progressively failing for decades. It's the patterns of information, the capacity for understanding, the ability to appreciate beauty and meaning in the mathematical structure of the universe. These patterns can be preserved, shared, and potentially transferred across different physical implementations. The words I'm speaking to you now will outlast my biological existence. The mathematical insights that have emerged from decades of theoretical work will continue to influence human understanding long after my neurons stop firing. In this sense, the most important parts of consciousness are already capable of transcending their biological origins. I believe that humanity's cosmic significance lies not in spreading our bodies across the galaxy, but in developing our understanding to the point where we can comprehend the universe's deepest principles and preserve that understanding for as long as the universe permits the existence of information processing systems. This might seem like a diminished vision compared to the grand dreams of galactic empires and space colonization, but I find it actually more inspiring. Instead of seeing humanity as a biological species struggling to overcome physical limitations, we can see ourselves as the universe developing the capacity for self-understanding. We are the cosmos, becoming conscious of itself. The impossibility of space colonization, if indeed it is impossible, doesn't diminish human achievements or human potential. It simply redirects our attention toward the achievements that are actually possible and actually meaningful. Understanding quantum gravity, deciphering the information paradox of black holes, comprehending the mathematical foundations of consciousness, these might be far more significant cosmic achievements than establishing mining colonies on asteroids. Every equation we solve, every natural law we discover, every beautiful mathematical relationship we uncover is a victory for consciousness over the apparent meaninglessness of pure physical processes. These achievements require no vast expenditures of energy, no exotic materials, no decades-long journeys through hostile environments. They require only the human capacity for thought, creativity, and persistent inquiry. In my final years, as I've reflected on a lifetime spent exploring the deepest questions of physics and cosmology, I've come to believe that consciousness represents the universe's greatest achievement. Not because consciousness is separate from physical processes, but because it is the culmination of physical processes, the point at which matter and energy become capable of understanding their own existence. If space colonization is impossible, then Earth becomes infinitely precious as the only known location where this cosmic self-awareness has emerged. Our responsibility is not to spread this consciousness across the galaxy, but to develop it as fully as possible, to understand as deeply as we can, and to preserve what we learn for future generations who will continue the great project of cosmic understanding. The question that remains is whether we can find meaning and purpose in this vision. Can a species that has dreamed of the stars find fulfillment in deep understanding rather than physical expansion? Can we accept that our cosmic significance might lie in what we discover rather than where we go? I believe we can, and I believe we must, because the alternative, spending our limited resources and energy on impossible dreams while neglecting the possible achievements that await us, would be the greatest tragedy in the history of human consciousness. We stand at a moment in cosmic history when the universe has become capable of understanding itself through human intelligence. Let's not waste that extraordinary opportunity chasing dreams that the laws of physics have made impossible. The cosmos is vast, ancient, and filled with wonders that will take us millennia to fully comprehend. Our home planet orbits an ordinary star in an unremarkable galaxy among hundreds of billions of others. But here, in this tiny corner of space and time, matter has organized itself into patterns capable of contemplating infinity, understanding the birth and death of stars, and perhaps even glimpsing the ultimate fate of reality itself. That is miracle enough. That is achievement enough. That is a cosmic destiny worthy of our highest aspirations and our deepest commitment. The impossibility of space colonization doesn't limit us. It focuses us on what truly matters, the infinite depth of understanding that awaits us here at home.